Meg Bugger Aiguchi on Hyde Castell. I have the Deputy Catherine Moore.
Thank you. Taoiseach, on board Pleanála is in the midst of the biggest crisis in its history. Its independence, its professionalism and its integrity are all in question. Allegations concern serious conflicts of interest on the part of the Deputy Chair of the Board, Paul Hyde, were first published in the Ditch on April the 13th. On Friday, Mr Hyde admitted overseeing a planning appeal from his sister-in-law, claiming it was inadvertent. He stepped aside on Monday pending investigations. Taoiseach, yesterday you told the Dáil that Mr Hyde no longer has access to documentation or the electronic system since he stepped aside. Are we to understand that he retained that access up until then? It doesn't exactly scream best practice. Best practice is not a phrase regularly associated with on board Pleanála these days. In 2020, it spent a whopping 8 million, a quarter of its 31 million annual budget on legal fees. This is perhaps unsurprising given that the High Court is the only forum to appeal SHT decisions which bypass local planning authorities and go straight to on board Pleanála. So how is it faring in relation to these cases? And it doesn't appear it's faring very well. Of the 40 SHD judicial reviews decided so far, on board Pleanála has successfully defended just 3. Any planning authority spending 25% of its budget defending its own decisions in court and losing a majority of them has a serious credibility issue. Legal fees may be soaring, but housing supply is not. Of the approximately 70,000 SHD units permitted to date, commencement notices have been submitted on just 13,000. The planning system may be fast-tracked, but the permissions once granted are not. And it's any wonder why, when there's no real penalty for not doing so. Meanwhile, 82% of all new residential schemes either applied for or granted in Dublin City in 2020 were built to rent. This is a disaster for Dublin, a conclusion that everyone in Dublin City Council seems to agree on, councillors and officials. But Taoiseach, somehow you don't. You think that any supply is good supply, even very low quality, unaffordable, built-to-rent development, which is cannibalising rental supply in Dublin, or residential supply in Dublin. And what is the government's answer to the sluggish build-to-supply? Gift developers €144,000 per apartment without asking anything off the sale price. I couldn't believe this when I read it. I just didn't think it was real. So my questions are, who made the decision to leave Mr Hyde in situ for 2 weeks despite the Minister ordering a senior counsel to investigate those allegations, and on board Pleanála ordering a mammoth audit of its work? And when can we expect to see the terms of reference for the Remy Farrell investigation? Will it be extended to other board members, or will it look at the members' interests?
Well, again, I mean, there's a number of questions there. I take it it's the board Pleanála issue, because I could deal at length on the housing issue. So as I said yesterday, and I thank you for raising the issue, Minister O'Brien is aware of these allegations which have been made, and he understands that those allegations are currently being denied by the board member concerned, but a senior counsel has been appointed by the Minister to provide a report in consideration of this, and those terms of reference and timelines are currently being finalised. As I said yesterday, again, separate to the allegations that have been made, Minister O'Brien has also been made aware of correspondence between the Deputy Chairperson of On Board Pleanála, Mr Paul Hyde, and the Board Secretary, which was brought to his department's attention by the Chairperson of On Board Pleanála. This concerns a conflict of interest disclosed by Mr Hyde on the 3rd of May 2022 in relation to a May 2021 board decision. And Mr Hyde states in his correspondence that he only became aware of this conflict of interest on the 28th of April 2022. Minister O'Brien then requested a report from the chairperson of On Board Pleanála when he became aware of this matter on the 6th of May 2022. And the chairperson responded to the minister on the 9th of May that Mr Hyde has agreed to absent himself from his duties as Deputy Chairperson for the time being on a strictly without prejudice basis, pending completion of the Chairperson's analysis of the matters raised. And then I said, in this context, Mr. Hyde will not be in attendance in the board's offices, have access to the board's electronic systems or documentation, and his case files have been reassigned to ensure the efficient discharge of the functions of the board. The Office of the Planning Regulator has independently written to the chairperson of An Bord Pleanála, requesting him to outline the systems and procedures that An Bord Pleanála has in place to ensure effective compliance with the statutory duties provided for in the Planning Acts regarding the declaration of interests and any other information he considers relevant. I understand An Bord Pleanála has responded to this request, and the Planning Regulator is considering the response. An Bord Pleanála is independent in its performance of its functions under the Planning Act. And pending the outcome of these considerations, I think it's important that we would allow, for these reports to be completed to make more informed comment in the aftermath of them. But needless to say, all board members are required to make a declaration of certain interests under Section 147 at least once a year, and the Register of Interests is available for public inspection. And under Section 148, where a member of the board has a pecuniary or other beneficial interest in or which is material to any appeal, contribution, question, determination, or dispute, which falls to be decided or determined by the board under any enactment, he or she shall disclose to the board the nature of his or her interest and shall take no part in the discussion, consideration, or decision-making in relation to the matter. Now, can I also say that in relation to, yes, there have been amendments to that, and also that in terms of improving legal capacity within Bord Pleanála, additional resources have been provided by the Minister to ensure that, because we're not satisfied with the level of litigation in the first instance, but also the outcome of the same.
Taoiseach, this is a very serious matter in relation to An Bord Pleanála, not least because it ceased to be the Planning Appeals Board in relation to strategic housing developments. It became the decision maker in relation to housing applications of 100 units or more, bypassing local authorities' development plans, which is a statutory function and one that the public are engaged in. There is a serious loss of confidence in An Bord Pleanála, and this has completely undermined that confidence, their integrity and their professionalism. Can you tell us if the terms of reference are going to be wide enough to include if other personnel, if anything is identified, whether members' interest will be reviewed in the context of those terms of reference? When will we see them? What's the timeline for dealing with that? And it wasn't An Bord Pleanála that sought to deliver on the SHDs. It was a function that was allocated to it. So there is a responsibility on government side in relation to this to make sure that the integrity of An Bord Pleanála is not undermined, and that is it's a really serious undermining of our planning system.
First of all, the Minister has acted quickly and promptly in relation to this, and has ordered, has appointed, a senior counsel to provide a report on this specific issue, and the terms of reference on that is currently being finalised. There won't be any undue delay, I can assure the Deputy, in respect of that, because the independence of Bord Pleanála as defined in the Planning Act is important in itself, but also has to be beyond any perception of any potential inappropriate behaviour or whatever, or failure to disclose. And I'm not making any judgments on this. And I want to stress that, because this is without prejudice what I'm saying to the conduct of the report itself. And we have to be fair in terms of that aspect of it. So the senior counsel, from my understanding, will be focusing in on this, but I'll come back to you as soon as the terms of reference are finalised. They will be published, and then that will happen in terms of that report. And I'm sure the Minister will continue to give this very, very serious consideration.